we sat there and I said, but Mom, and she said, no buts. For 5 minutes, take a deep breath, look at each other, look at the two of you. You went from early 20s rabble-rouser types to leaders of a movement that has changed this nation and will change this world. And there we were, stupidly crying like babies.
Kathy McInnis Misenor was among those who had a front row seat watching the Americans with Disabilities Act become law. McInnis was born in 1958 and has fought rheumatoid arthritis since she was 5 years old. She could walk until she was 8 or 9 years old, but by 12 years old, she was using a wheelchair. But the wheelchair did not take the fight out of McInnis, who hails from a long-standing Irish activist family. Her great-grandfather, Francis Patrick Murphy, once stared down the Klan in Saco. One of McInnis's first battles was a campaign for Saco City Council in 1980.
There were several councilors that were just outrageous, calling me mentally unstable, mentally retarded. She shouldn't have run if she knew she couldn't get into the building. It's not a place for them. But I did win. They did have to renovate a downstairs room to be accessible and then make a plan to make the entire city hall accessible.
In the early 1980s, McInnis worked with the newly formed Maine Association of Handicapped Persons and turned her attention to the issue of accessible transportation in Portland and South Portland. Portland and South Portland have paratransit buses available, but they are only available on 72 hours' notice for medical appointments.
We had tried to educate people around accessible transportation way before any lawsuits were filed. So we did a series of public forums and invited everybody, including like Senator Mitchell, town officials, and basically said you need to come and hear why this is cost effective.
And she says there was a lot of foot dragging on the issue, with officials offering only limited service instead of fitting all of the buses for accessibility, a compromise the association rejected.
We decided that if they chose to order them inaccessible, we would do massive protests. And of course, they were going to come online in January. So we decided this will be interesting. These are brand new inaccessible buses. They are advertising everywhere for ads on the buses. So we bought ads on the buses. It says, if you can't walk, you can't ride. And then they thought, well, that's it. But it wasn't. The day the buses rolled, those that had crutches or whatever took their sweet time walking up onto the bus and saying, oh, I was going to go to the mall today, but since my friend Kathy can't get on the bus, I don't think I am. And then taking their sweet time to get off.
The efforts in Portland and South Portland were a groundbreaking effort by the Maine Association of Handicapped Persons to push for accessible transportation, an issue that had become the target of protests nationally.
We combined every disability group around transit in the nation that was doing work around trying to get their place more accessible. And we filed an appeal in the First Circuit Court. That's like the court that would be before you go to the Supreme Court. And we won. And they caved. Department of Justice, the Department of Transit, they caved. Big time caved. And so they were forced to issue the regulations that mandated all new buses be accessible.
In August of 1984, Maine Superior Court Judge Donald Alexander then ordered Portland and South Portland to either buy accessible buses or retrofit their buses to accommodate persons with disabilities. McInnis remembers her first ride on one of those buses.
And so we arranged we would go out shopping. So we did that, and she's sitting on the bus, but it wasn't literally till I got to the store and I was shopping that I realized, my God, I can do this all the time now at a half hour, not even call, not a notice, because the paratransit was 72 hours in advance, only to medical appointments.
Maine was the first state to declare access to transportation a civil right.
Boy, the calls we got the day of that decision from every state in the Union, from foreign countries and operators trying to translate, and it was wonderful and crazy all at the same time.
In May of 1990, debate on the Americans with Disabilities Act began in the U.S. House of Representatives. Then, finally, the House came to a vote on the legislation.
And then the roll call was starting to take. And you would see the lights. And once it hit the magic number, which we all know for passage, there was this, is it going to hit? Make it short. And suddenly it passes. And you could see some of the Congress people, the representatives that worked on it, just starting to just get emotional. But there's silence and then going, oh my God. And then there was this sigh through all of us, and then within seconds, just roaring applause. Doors were flying open. And I'm saying, get out, get out, get out. Let other people come in and see this while the board is still lit up. Let them see it. So I get out, and Orrin Hatch is running down the hall, and he says, what happened? What happened? And I said, they passed it. And that was amazing that day. And I said, I have to call my mom. And the only place to call her was an inaccessible phone booth right there outside of the house gallery. So I had my friend, who is a little person, she has to get inside, and she has to, with my help, jump up on the seat to get the phone down for me and dial the number.
From there, it was on to the Senate. A controversial amendment delayed the vote on the bill for weeks, and there was tough opposition from North Carolina Senator Jesse Helms. But when the votes were counted, disability rights activists had won another victory.
The cheers were so deafening that the walls, which the space there, the sound is incredible, were just reverberating. And the whole room felt like it was vibrating and lifting up. I mean, and then Steny Hoyer was there, and Orrin Hatch came up, both of which had family members with disabilities. And they came out, and they were saying that we did it. And they began to say how we taught them a lesson about how things could be done.
It wasn't perfect, but disability rights activists had gotten what they most wanted.
We had civil rights. They couldn't throw me out of the Faneuil Hall store they threw me out when I was a teenager because I might break something. You know? They couldn't say, you can't have a beer because we don't serve sick people alcohol.
I'm Keith Ludden. Our series on the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act is funded in part by the Maine Humanities Council, in partnership with Oral History and Folklife Research, Alpha One Independent Living Center, WMPG, and the Disability Rights Center of Maine.